Reflections on the Katha Upanishad. Now first, I think what has inspired a lot of my treatment and trying to draw to the enriched presence which I find centrally and fully alive within these marvelous meditations, witnesses, communions and souls of pregnant and poetic rapture is that we have to understand something organically, as I've said, fully, as if we ourselves would have formed every single situation of witness that we find therein and therethrough, and tend towards that capacity. And so, having to understand the situation of human function, and what it's trying to recollect, what it's trying to resolve, and what it's trying to communicate itself to, is what gives it its presence and purpose and engagement of full capacity. So, in this age, in this situation, what do we know went before? What are these appended onto? These are appended onto and make continuous and direct reference to the content that we'll find later catalogued, even after these things were fully expressed and formed and founded, in the Rig Veda. What do we find in the Rig Veda? In the Rig Veda, we find the tradition of the ancient sages that we can definitely put on a level with a Pythagoras, a Parmenides, a Diotima, but who had a much greater shared culture of integration and expression and alignment, the prominent presence of which was an undiscursive participation, an unreflective revelation of what they saw as the uncaused cause of our full nature and state of being and capacity. Now, why do I use this phrase, uncaused cause? I use this phrase because in a continent condition, as they continuously illumine and express, it transcends and engages the full dimension of witness and forming to a way where that which is that which delivers the birth also becomes the perfection of the child, where that which gives the light is also the means of realization, integration, and alignment. That the universal and unchanging parent condition that gives the supply and energy and cause and witness of inhabitation is the full competent oneness, the seat and agency, which is the full truth and our own full truth that recollects to the living soul of all happening. In the dimensions and details which are fully enriching and which have no division, we could say, between intellectual, integral, moral, or spiritual encounter and grounding. The time of the Upanishads found these traditions which each of them, all these different minds and souls and sages, formed their hermitages, ashrams, associations that were of respected presence and place, that carried on for many generations, and that spoke mutually in similar yet individual terms. They found the richness of the inspired truth in what had come down to them tarnished by situations of false inheritance. They thought people were becoming entangled with superficial aspects which did not fulfill them, and therefore they wanted to recall them to this universal in the particular, this full and unconditioned truth, which is both their full nature and self, and the self and happenings of all comprisings. And so this was the motivation, this was the communion, this was the impetus which gave the collective witness and course of the Upanishads to their founding. That, I think, is the first note. The second note that we should also perhaps make is that when there's a culture where people have become most inspiredly engaged and directed, but if we want to use the term otherworldly, that they don't associate their name or possession or ownership of expression as anything to be encouraged or engaged with, then the use and reuse of names, the people coming after and compiling and throwing things together that don't necessarily come from a parent same stock or source, some of which are of inspired and universal merit and worth, others that completely and directly and barefacedly contradict the reality of that habitation and form. This, which occurs in all traditions, occurs here, we could say, equally, if not to its full intensity. So there are incongruous things, incongruous passages, but there are also congruent wholes. And it's important to keep that in mind when engaging with these materials. So coming directly to the Katha Upanishad, what do we find before us? What is the meditation that forms the significance of the whole? This is most uniquely seen as one of the most perfect and dramatic and story-inlaid introductions to this whole intention and purpose of what I laid forth. So what we first find is Vaja Shravasa, who is a father. And in Shankara's commentary, he breaks down the root of these two words to be fame and food. So those who gained fame through giving food. So in this situation where people are taking to themselves the authority and power and functioning that lies at the essence of spiritual and integral happening, we have a father whose ability to give hollow wealth is the starting place. And then from him comes the son, the spirit, the subtle fire, that in this situation he gives to death. So also in the Vedas, and providing the conceptual backdrop, there is this continual notion that just as this fire is an image and representation of what comes to the soul and source of things, so this universal feeding in this ever-spoken word, sitting on the fuel of that which it consumes of manifestation, the divine element is born within. And so this being driven to the ultimate confrontation of this sacrificial fire that comes to the true realization of forming, forms the basis of the story, contemplation, and expression that we find from the very beginning founded. And so the Father has the Son, and the Son, witnessing these sacrificial gifts being led forward, and seeing nothing of worth in those things, implores then, what does this father, what does this parentage mean to do with him? And there's another intuition that lives throughout the Vedas, which is often promoted, that namely as this reality fulfills both functions of parent and son, so in many streams of its contemplation it says the son is always greater than the father. So the perfect delivery and child of this reality exceeds those narrow circumstances which brought it to birth. So we find a similar vein of expression contained herein. And then he has his confrontation by being given to death. And then he has to stay for 3 days in the house of death. And I think these intuitions and the often used expressions of the triple sacrifice, of the triple integration, of the three, mere the 3 dimensions that they often gave and named to the manifest happenings of the universe. And those 3 dimensions are tamas, inertia, rajas, the ruling capacity, and sattva, which is seen as pure being or harmony or essence. And so this sacrificial fire, because he has had to stay in death's house, in death's home. So just as all situations of manifestation are just shadows of death, so staying in the universe and being unreconciled through all these 3 dimensions, death to be propitious to that which is truly worthy in this divine fire, gives it 3 boons. And so I think the 3 boons are arranged in the direct sequence of those 3 qualities. So in inertial, accidental relation in tamas, the first lowest, we might say, but nonetheless important gift that Nachiketas asked for is reconciliation to his father, and that his father and his relations with others and with the world be satisfied. The second gift that he asks for is, like the ruling capacity, the knowing and the capacity to rule this eternal creative power, this primordial causational principle, this sacrificial fire, whose secret is so precious and is imparted by death. And then, when he asks for the third boon, which corresponds to the essence of his pure being, of the harmony of his essential nature and reality, then just as the pure being of reality can lead people astray into false attachments, so this ultimate reality, this death, first puts him off, first tries to tempt him with all the allurements of the stability of manifest existence in the world. And only once he has put away from himself the desire for these things, then does it come to the culminating passage which all the previous course of the meditation is acting as a launching pad unto, into this universal comprehension and forming. And that, of course, forms the meat of the substance of the engagement. And so, first being introduced as the differentiation between the merely pleasant, which can lead people astray, and the truly good, it then launches into realizing that beyond quality and state, the ingenerable and eternal, which is the full truth and full possibility of recollection and union and engagement, that not by hollow competency, not by book learning, not by brain power, but by living, fulfilled, direct association is alone awoken unto. And the way this is done is by all of our lived orientation being yoked to the supernal and continent truth, which is at all-inclusive residence and witness unto all. And the details of that expression fill in enlightening margin all of the pages that we can treat in all their measures and margins. But perhaps that is good for an introduction into what I believe lies at the organic and competent cause and truth of the whole forming.